Hoi anō e ngā rangatira tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou I tatu mai nei tēnei wā te whakanui a ki tēnei kaupapa. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou mō koutou whakaaro te haramai te tuku whakaaro ki tērā o ngā rangatira e hinga ai I runga I tēnei a tātou rori I runga I tōna paikara. I taua wā tainoa ki te wā tēnei te mihi atu kia koe naumai, whakatau mai. He mihi anō kia koutou me te whānau o tēnei a tātou, me ngā kaimahi, me ngā kaihua, I haramai nei te tautoko hoki I tēnei a tātou kaupapa. Me hoki tā mātou nei minita mai I te kāwanatanga, tēnei te mihi atu kia koe Michael, mō tō tautoko hoki ki tēnei a tātou kaupapa. Kia koutou e te spokes, tēnei te mihi atu mō koutou whakaaro. Te whakanui ake tēnei a tātou kōrero. He whakahirehire tēnei te hoki te mahara ki taua wā, ki te wā I hinga ai tēnei a tātou, I mui I tēnei hohi pera. Nō reira, ka reo e kume ake tēnei koru, he mihi hei whakatau I a koutou I tēnei wā. I tēnei wā ka huatu te rākau ki tā mātou nei kaumātua, rangatira. Mana hei whakawāte hoki tēnei a tātou wāhi, tainua ki te waiata, ka huri te ke o te waka ki tā mātou nei minita Michael. Nō reira kia koutou katoa, kia kaha, kia maia, kia manawa nui, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
Kia ora Donovan. Just a short karakia and a blessing for Doctor Who we all know that passed away in this space today. Ko reire I tēnā te matua te tamata wairua tapu hāmene. Hei hone no mata o porauna e tuatu nei mai tō aroaro. E tuatu nei e hoai tēnā hoke mai te whakamai mahara hoki tēnei tapu tau mātau. E mohi osana hoki e hoa wene kua hui hui mai nei roto I tēnei wā. E mohi ona hara mai ki kone ki te waihui o rātau arohatana I o rātau roi mata hoki ki runei tēnei wā e wā. Nō reira ho mai kia mātou ko hatoa hoki te kaha te kororia I runei tēnō te matua te tamata wairua tapu. Āmene.
He honore, he gloria, mangaro no ki te whenua. Kakaro, ai e, ki ngā tangata katoa. Ake ake, te atua, te pirima, tōku oranga, tōku oranga.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Robert Thompson. I'm the Secretary of Cycle Action Advocacy Group, Spokes Dunedin. This plaque on the wall behind me reads, in memory of Dr. Lee Hong Chris He. His life cut short while cycling past this spot, 19 November 2012. Missed by family, friends, colleagues, and the Dunedin community. And we are gathered here today to pay tribute to Chris and to dedicate this plaque. I recall very clearly the blue-skied Monday that Chris died. My colleague Hank Weiss happened past this spot shortly after the accident, and he phoned me right away. Although I did not know Chris personally in life, I felt his death very personally all the same. When I was 18 years old, in my second month at university, I was hit almost head-on by a car while riding my bike. I was lucky. I survived, and I eventually recovered. But from that day forward, the invincibility of my youth passed into a recognition of the fragility of life. Almost everyone who regularly rides a bicycle has had at least one near miss with an opening car door. It happens to the most experienced cyclists, and Chris He did nothing wrong that day. It could have been me, it could have been anyone who rides a bicycle in Dunedin. Nor should we lay the blame solely at the feet of the car or truck drivers who were involved in the accident. The fact is that these dooring incidents are very common, but are also entirely preventable. The fault lies in a system that sandwiches cyclists between parked and moving vehicles. And it saddens me that not 6 months before Chris's death, Spokes Dunedin identified this very block as a prime location where dooring could lead to serious injury or death of cyclists. Many communities can intersect in a single person, and Chris's death has been felt across the communities he was part of, with all of you here as a testament to that. Here to remember Chris are friends, students and colleagues from the Faculty of Dentistry, members of the university medical communities, members of the cycling community, members of the wider Dunedin community, including council staff, business leaders, sitting councillors, and prospective councillors, and also representatives of the larger New Zealand community. Although 3 of our local MPs are out of town today, some of their representatives are here on their behalf. Everyone here has been impacted by Chris's death in some way, and some are here in multiple capacities. Daryl Basser, for example, is representing the office of David Clark, but Daryl is also here in a more personal capacity because when Daryl was hit by a car while riding his bike, he was left with serious injury to his face, jaw, and teeth, and Chris did a lot of the reconstructive work on Daryl's teeth. Given the many layers of community, it is appropriate to have representatives from each of Chris's communities say a few words. As you all know, Chris was a lecturer and researcher in the Faculty of Dentistry at the university, and I've asked Professor Tom Cardos, Assistant Dean of the Faculty of Dentistry, to represent Chris's colleagues and students and the university and medical communities. Professor Cardos?
Well, today we remember Chris Lee Hong Hee, who was tragically killed at this spot November last year. Chris was a cheerful family man with a loving wife and 2 young children. He was an enthusiastic senior lecturer in the Department of Oral Rehabilitation. His special area of interest and expertise was in the discipline of biomaterial science, where he applied physical and mathematical principles to biological tissues, in particular dental enamel. He also applied these principles to materials used in clinical dentistry. Of particular interest to me was his understanding of the importance of the nature of weak chemical bonds that are present between proteins and hard and soft tissues, and how these influence the behaviour and properties of the tissues. Chris came to Otago from Australia after completing his PhD. His PhD was his second doctorate, having previously undertaken postgraduate education and training in China. As a teacher, he transferred his passion for biomaterial science onto his undergraduate students, making the discipline interesting. The student evaluations of his teaching and the course he was responsible for were always positive. He was instrumental in assisting several new staff members with establishing their research portfolios, in addition to postgraduates who were completing their doctorates. Chris took up cycling as a commuter, travelling from Waverley to the dental school. His motivation for so doing was in order to overcome the difficulties in finding a park in the vicinity of the hospital and university campus. The benefits of exercise were seen secondary. The daily commute on his bicycle became a way of life for him. For his life to end, as it did, was truly tragic. Let's now observe a minute's silence to personally reflect in remembrance of Chris. Thank you. The route that Chris followed every day had sections in which he could cycle in relative safety, and others where intimacy with vehicles and cyclists posed a serious daily risk. For 3 years I commuted from North Taieri to work at the dental school on a bicycle, although at that time the traffic was significantly less. I often travelled at times when the road traffic was hectic. Playing squash in the evenings during the winter presented an additional hazard. The 1 metre width of my squash bag on the carrier. Using a bicycle as a means of travel around Dunedin in safety has lots of advantages to the individuals that cycle, and also for city administrators. The opening of 2 tunnels between Dunedin and Mosgiel for cyclists and the provision of dedicated cycleways through the city would mitigate many of the risks. Separation of cyclists from road traffic would go a long way to reduce the dangers faced by cyclists. There are more and more separated cycleways and shared pathways appearing all around the world. I was fortunate to spend 6 months in Davis, California, a university town about half the size of Dunedin, where separated cycleways and shared pathways are heavily used and accepted by residents as being of high value. In Dunedin, the provision of cycle lanes on main routes in the city has been a step in the right direction by the council. However, at times they are inadequate in width and disappear at critical points. These inadequacies have led to many serious injuries and several deaths over the years. But dedicated cycleways would enable the city to be recognised as a truly cycle-friendly community. With Chris's death, people are now realising there is a better way, that we can prevent these terrible accidents from happening. We may console ourselves somewhat with the knowledge that he is not forgotten, and that the community has taken note, is learning, and is now making real changes that will save lives in the future. Thank you, Chris. Your death has not been in vain.
The impacts of Chris's death have not been confined to the dental school or to the university, but have been felt by the wider Dunedin community. I would therefore like to invite Deputy Mayor of Dunedin, Chris Staines, to say a few words on behalf of the Dunedin community.
Firstly, could I put an apology for our Mayor Dave Cull, who unfortunately couldn't be here today due to a prior engagement. As Dave is a keen cyclist, I know that he would have liked to have been here today to share this memorial event. You cannot replace a human soul. Each is unique. That is why when a good soul like Chris is lost, we mourn deeply. That he died, leaving a young family behind, only heaps more sorrow on his needless death. Today, 10 months after the tragedy, we are here to unveil this plaque in his memory. We are here to acknowledge the work that Chris had been doing to ensure better safety for cyclists prior to his death. We are here to bear witness so others will not meet a similar fate. We are here to assure Chris's family that things will change to improve traffic layout and cycling safety. Chris's death prompted a swift change in thinking on the matter of cycle safety in Dunedin. As a result, the Dunedin City Council and the New Zealand Transport Agency, with input from cycle safety group spokes, have worked together preparing options for consultation. These recommended options propose separating cyclists from heavy traffic on the busy one-way section of State Highway 1 through the centre of our city. And I notice that already, before consultation has begun, there are people who are bemoaning the loss of parking. Surely parking is far less valuable than a life. To the family, we give our most heartfelt condolences. It is impossible for us to replace what you have lost. Unfortunately, we cannot bring Chris back, but his memory will live on as we move to improve traffic management in the city. And this plaque is testament to this.
Sometimes it can feel like Wellington is far away from Dunedin. But every accidental death like this has a wider national impact. Because we are on a state highway, it is appropriate to place Chris's death in the context of safety on these national roads. We are honored to have Associate Minister for Transport, Michael Woodhouse, here, not only as a representative of the wider New Zealand community, but also in his capacity as Minister in charge of road safety and cycle safety. Mike.
I didn't know Chris, but I don't think I'll ever forget that sinking feeling on that morning when you wonder who it was that suffered the fate that Chris did. A relief, I suppose, selfishly, that it wasn't a loved one of mine. But then an empathy, I guess, as a cyclist, as a road user, as a parent, with Chris's family. I think we all shared that in a way. And we're here to pay tribute to a fellow who I have come to understand was a terrific guy, tremendous person, well regarded at the dental school, and a loving father. I think the best tribute that we can pay to him is to ensure that his loss doesn't happen again to the extent that we can. And we can't bring Chris back, but I think we can learn a great deal about the circumstances that led to his tragic passing, and I am very encouraged by the progress and the accelerated progress that has been made as a consequence of this tragedy. And I know that NZTA, the city and spokes and other stakeholders are working very hard to find a solution to the issue of how we share the road. And as Associate Transport Minister with responsibility for road safety, and as one of your representatives here in Dunedin, I commit that when we have a plan that we have consensus on, and I don't think we're far away from that, that barriers will be removed to ensure that that solution is put in place. I think that's the tribute we can pay to Chris. That's the legacy out of this tragedy that he will leave us. I hope that's not long before we can get to that point. Thank you all.
Imagine a world with no footpaths, where everyone had to walk single file between parked cars and fast-moving heavy trucks. Such a world, so unfriendly to people, is not a place that I would want to live in. And having space for footpaths is better for people on foot, better for people in cars, and better for the health of the community. A system that sandwiches cyclists between parked and moving vehicles is similar to that imaginary, unfriendly world. The good news is that we know how to change things for the better. The New Zealand Transport Agency and Dunedin City Council have just proposed to put these dedicated cycleways along the one-way system, creating a real physical barrier between cyclists and moving vehicles. This would not only improve safety on the street, but would be like building footpaths in a world that never had footpaths. Right now, this proposal is still just an idea, and the details have yet to be sorted out. And it may never be anything more than just an idea without you, without each and every one of you. It needs your vocal support to happen. And I would ask you to take a minute at the end of this to speak to one of the spokes representatives who are wearing name badges to find out what you can do and find out what we can do to help you have your say. Chris was an outstanding member of society, an outstanding member of this community, and the several communities that he was a member of, all interlinking. And Chris, he should not have died. And all we can do now is remember him as we work to save lives in the future. I thank you all for coming today, and I thank the speakers for their time. Thank you.